Welcome, one and all, to tonight's Word of Josh Monday night. Josh, it's Monday night, which means I'm back, and it's great to be here with everyone. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Tonight is going to be something very different than what I've done over the last several weeks. Anyone who's a regular watcher or listener of this show knows we primarily are talking sports. We're not going to be doing that tonight. We have something that's pretty important that's been on my mind, and something I know that's been on a lot of people's minds, especially in my world and my life. Tonight we're talking teachers, and we're talking the importance of the teachers in this country, specifically here in the state of Maryland, both in Baltimore County Public Schools and Howard County Public Schools, and really any school system in the state of Maryland and any school system throughout this country. Teachers are the backbone of the future of this country because they have the most challenging task of educating our students, children, and the future of this country all across America. And at this time, teachers need our support, they need our love, they need our help, and most importantly, they need our kindness. And this whole episode is dedicated to every single teacher that is out there, anyone who is currently teaching public school, private school, elementary school, middle school, high school, preschool, college, anywhere you want. It doesn't really matter. If you are a teacher, we thank you, we need you, and we are so thrilled to be having each and every one of you do what you do day in and day out because you love to teach and you have chosen a career path which is so critical and so important to our future, and that's educating the youth of America. And tonight's going to be all about teachers. About a week ago, a very good friend of mine wrote something on Facebook, which since I've told him I consider an article, a work of art. You can call it a lot of things, but it spoke on so many levels. And Jeremy G wrote this amazing piece of work about being the spouse of a public school teacher, and he did an outstanding job of illustrating everything that a school teacher goes through, and what their days are like, and then focusing on the work to rule environment that's currently going on in Howard County and that other school systems have going on or potentially will have going on very shortly in the future. And I thought, hey, what a great opportunity as the spouse of a teacher myself. I thought, how great would it be to bring on Jeremy, talk to him about his article, and share with everyone what it's like to be the spouse of a teacher, but most importantly, help tell the story of teachers and what teachers are going through on a day in and day out basis, and letting everyone hear about it from a different angle, hear about it from what it's like when teachers leave the building, and really get an idea of what teachers do every single day to educate America's youth. It's so fascinating when you think about it, and when you get a front row seat to see it, it's even more fascinating. So I'm going to stop talking. I am thrilled to share with everyone my conversation that I had with Jeremy G, and I hope everyone enjoys. So sit back, relax, and welcome myself and Jeremy G. All right, so got a very different flow this week, different tone, but it's going to be a good one. Very excited. I've got someone on the show who I've known going back to maybe 1988, 1989. Does that sound about right?
Sounds about right.
32 years. He joined us on the podcast several years ago to talk about theater and God, I'm drawing a blank on the name. Silhouette
Stages.
Silhouette Stages, right. But we're going to talk about something much different today, but something you and I both relate to. So first, want to welcome Jeremy. Thank you for being here with us. And thanks for coming on. So I got to set this scene for you. So this past Monday night, after I did last week's podcast on the NFL labor strike, which is kind of fitting if you think about it.
That's interesting.
I was getting into bed and checked Facebook, and I saw this post from you, and it really caught my attention. It was titled, "From the Spouse of a Public School Teacher, Work to Rule." And I've got to tell you, I read the entire thing at that point, from start to finish. So I wasn't really able to go to sleep at that point because number one, I was inspired, motivated, fired up, angry, and supportive all in one. Inspired and motivated because how could I contribute also as the spouse of a public school teacher? Angry at some different things that I've heard over the last several months about public school teachers. And supportive because again, I'm married to a public school teacher. So I got to just ask, what inspired you to write this incredible, to call it journalism, I feel like is even a little bit of an insult because there was so much passion behind it. I mean, I've never read anything like it. So
Thank you. That
first,
means a lot.
welcome, and talk to me a little bit about it and how you got there.
Thank you. Well, that means a lot, and I do appreciate you inviting me on. I'm so glad to talk about this because can't think of anything more important at the moment. But yeah, my wife has been a public school teacher for 22, 23 years. So I've lived it, like you, day in and day out. I've seen what teachers do, the extra work that they put in, the never-ending hours, and I started watching some board meetings here in Howard County. I've
Oy.
been involved, over the years in different things like redistricting and just different things like that. But watching how the system was flip-flopping on the reopening issue and subsequently seeing how all of the blame was falling on the teachers, reading things people were posting online, it just, this has been building up for years and years and years. And I was just trying to find a way to an outlet, how do I not only express myself, what I'm feeling, but, how do I support the teachers? And when Howard County announced the Howard County Education Association announced the work to rule, I was like, this is it. This is the moment. And I thought I'd post a little something in support, and like a snowball, I just started writing, and it wound up being the longest post I've ever written. So, and like you said, from the perspective of the spouse of a public school teacher.
Yeah, and I think it's I think it's important. I don't think until you live with a teacher, if you're not a teacher, if you're a teacher,
Mhm.
if you're a teacher, you know what it is you do, you know what type of effort it is. It's not 9 to 3 or 8 to 2:30 or 7:30 to 2, whatever the hours are. It doesn't matter if it's elementary school, middle school, high school. It is a job that is basically 24/7 during the school year. And no matter what anybody says, well, teachers get their summers off. Yeah, live with the teacher for a little while. Let me know if they get their summers off. And at
Right.
least in Baltimore County, where I am, teachers don't even have an option of 12-month pay. So
Wow.
they're 10-month employees. They don't have an option to have their checks stretched to cover the
Hmm.
summer. So for 2.5 months, at least in Howard County, they have the 12-month
Right.
option. In
Exactly.
Baltimore County, I once called the Board of Ed and they said, well, save your money differently. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
The question was, why is it not available? But we're not going to
Right.
go down that rabbit hole. So seeing what teachers do, and you talked about it as a new parent. That was one of the first things you talked about when you
Yep.
guys were new parents and your wife had to go back to work.
Hmm.
What was that like? Talk to me about the impact because your kids are a little bit older now.
Right.
But talk about what their journey's been like and your journey again as the spouse,
Hmm.
being the spouse of a public school teacher, because the county doesn't care that you have young children or the systems
Nope.
don't care. It's
Nope. She
go
got
back to
her
work.
standard maternity leave, and then that was it. Could she have taken more time off? Maybe, but that just adds to the work.
Right.
We were very fortunate that I have, a more of a flexible job. But she would leave the house, at the time, had a longer commute. She'd leave the house in the 6 o'clock hour, maybe 6:15, something like that. 45-minute commute. She was there really early, usually got home around 7 p.m., 8 p.m. And so I was, driving the kids to daycare, the little ones. I had my, the baby carriers. I was the one picking them up. I was doing, doctor checkups and all this stuff, which I'm not complaining about. But the amount that falls on a teacher is just so out of whack with not only their pay, but the amount of respect that they get. And so, a lot of people really struggle. If I didn't have that job, I don't know what we would have done. I don't know how single parents, if you're a teacher, I have no idea how they do it. And so, yeah, there was something I talked about in the article. And I said, my wife missed a lot of family events, like the kids' activities, because she was either at a PTA meeting or a fundraiser. She's incredible at what she does, and couldn't ask for a better teacher. But the sacrifices that she has made, you would think, garner a level of respect and a salary to match, but it just never gets there, which is part of which blows my mind.
Well, and what's interesting too, because everything you say, I feel like I'm having a conversation with myself for a little bit when
Right.
people talk to me about my wife and what she does, because over the years, the long days, the long hours, the getting there early, the staying late, but then when they get home after doing
Never ends.
10, their day's not over. There are nights I'm sitting on the couch watching TV, and this is pre-COVID, and she's doing stuff till 11
Yep.
or 11:30 at night, and then only to get up the next day at 6:30. And I think what's interesting too is you talk about the different responsibilities that fell upon you
Mhm.
as the spouse, and you made a comment that's really important, because she could have taken more time, but that makes things harder.
Yep.
And I think that I don't think people realize how much time teachers spend going to school sick, not feeling well, because everything that gets passed around school, when back to school comes in September every year, it's only a matter of 2 weeks before
Yeah.
cold start, flus start,
Right.
every sort of ick starts, right? There have been times my wife has gone to school knowingly sick,
Mhm.
because even though she has a ridiculous amount of sick days. I think she once told me she has over 290 sick days
Yep.
at this point from
Yep.
all of her years. I'm like, well, that's great. Does that mean you could take 290 days off? That's like
Right.
almost 2 years. She's like, no. She's like, maybe they can buy retirement credit or something.
Right.
But for them, it's hard to miss a day.
Hmm.
My wife at one point 7 years ago wound up with a concussion, and I thought she had it. She hadn't gotten it diagnosed yet. I'm like, you need to go to the doctor. She's like, there's 4 days left in the year. I can't miss school.
Wow.
Well, finally she's at school and looks like she's on another planet. And she finally went to the doctor, and the doctor's like, you have a concussion. You need a certain amount of rest. And she didn't even want to do it until the doctor finally said, this isn't an option.
Yeah.
And that's how committed she was,
Mhm.
because she feels her students need her there.
Right.
And it's not fair to her students when she's not there. And it's not to knock the job substitutes do, but it is a different education. And then on top of it, the time of year. So what's it like for you when your wife has to take time off? Because I feel like for me, it borderline is like needing an act of Congress to
Yes.
really get a teacher, or they have to plan it so far in
Mhm.
advance. And I don't think people realize teachers go to school sick. They go to school feeling not well. They go to school exhausted, and they're doing it because they love what they do, and
Yep.
because they, for the most part, love and adore their students.
Right. Well, one of the things I mentioned in the article is during the school year, um, any type of vacation is off the table. It's just not even an option.
Or if it is, you're
Um,
going over winter and spring break where there's a
yes,
premium on travel.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the reason is, if anytime she takes off, even if it's a half day to take care of something, the teachers have to leave detailed, hour by hour lesson plans for the sub. A sub that doesn't know their students, doesn't know what they're in the middle of working on, And so, if a teacher is sick, if my wife's not feeling well, to tell her, why don't you just stay home and rest? Well, I'm either going to be up late the night before creating these detailed lesson plans, and I'm not going to rest the next
Right.
day because emails never stop. And one thing I was going to mention that was great timing. My wife got an email this morning around 9 a.m. This is Saturday morning at 9 a.m. from a parent asking all kinds of questions about the upcoming schedule changes here in Howard County. And it was 9 a.m. on a Saturday.
Yep.
So I was like, you're not on call 24/7. And one of the, if I may, another
Go for
great
it.
way that I explain teaching, which I think is a way I understand it well, is imagine if you had to, at whatever your job is, give a 5 to 6 hour presentation to a group of about 20 to 30, however old the students are, who may or may not be paying attention and interrupting constantly every day for 10 months
Yep.
or 180 days. So Monday, this weekend I'd be prepping for my Monday 5 hour presentation. I would need PowerPoint slides, a script, know where I'm going to questions and all that stuff. I do my presentation, come home Monday, and I'm like, I got to do another one tomorrow. So I come home, I start prepping for another 5 hour it just never ends. And
Never ending. Right.
the teachers, they want to do a good job.
Yep.
So, coming home and just trying to turn it off, it's not in their nature. And I think that's where writing what I wrote, the article or whatever you call it, really made me realize that, because over the years I've tried to get my wife to pull back and, can you just, try to work the hours you're paid or whatever. And I finally realized that it's not her.
Yep.
That's how teachers are wired.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to do a good job. It's
Yep.
the system that really has allowed this to get to a breaking point. And that was a big realization.
Let me ask you this, because for me, this experience over the last year at this point that
Mhm.
we've been in this, virtual learning environment, I always knew how hard teachers worked
Right.
because I always saw the part of it after school. And well, we all grew up going to school, right?
Mhm.
So we know what's involved, but I don't think I fully even got it until a year ago at this time, where teachers across the country transitioned to teaching from a classroom
Mhm.
and had to learn on the fly how
Right.
to teach virtually.
Yep.
Mid-year, midway, like the year's almost over, and
Right.
it's look, we all use Zoom. We've all kind of like none of us really remember what life was like at this point without Zoom. But to try to do presentations or teaching, and whether you're in sales or whether you're in
Mhm.
operations or whatever you do, it's different. But for a teacher, they have to do the same things that everyone's doing from a presentation standpoint. But like you said, they're doing it every day. And they also have the task of figuring out how to captivate, motivate, and inspire
Yep.
students to learn from the comfort of their own home, where all they could do at any point they want is just click that and boom,
Yeah.
they're off system.
Right. Right.
Or and to be able to sit back and watch a teacher do her thing, and to be able to hear the students' enthusiasm and still hear how much learning is going on. And there's nothing that drives me crazier than to hear that kids are falling behind, kids are not learning. Like, look, you can make
Yep.
that argument in certain areas any time of any school year.
Mhm.
And that's a whole podcast and a whole lecture and a whole conversation for another different day. But every time I hear that, it's like,
Infuriating. Yeah.
how do you say that? Do you
Right.
see what these teachers are doing? And
Yep.
then the thing that's driving me nuts, and I've read it recently, and I've even seen replies to some of your comments in writing.
Yeah. It's hard to hold back.
Teachers need to get back to work, or they've been, the one that'll make me my blood boil is they've been on vacation for a year.
Right. Yep.
I will pay any one of these knuckleheads $1,000 to come stand 6 inches from my wife's face and tell her she's been on
Hmm.
vacation for a year, as long as they agree to the waiver that I'm not and she's not responsible for whatever happens. Go and tell any teacher that they've been on vacation for a year. How
Right.
insulting and how ridiculous.
That is the things that I've read and heard, that's one of the ones that drives me crazy. It's, teachers need to get back to teaching, and we need to, get them back to educating our kids, and that whole, like, get them back argument, that is what pushes me over the edge. And as I mentioned before we started, I'm actually sitting, I thought it'd be fitting, but I'm sitting where my wife has been teaching for the past, I don't know, however many months, past year, basically. So
Right.
I'm in our basement. We've converted it to a classroom. We've got a whiteboard, and there's a bookshelf and all kinds of
Darts.
charts and everything. She comes down here every day. I don't know, 7 something, and she's down here till 9, 10 o'clock at night. Um, she's had, like, as you said, the shift to online learning, they had no notice.
Yep.
So she has had to learn, and I think that's the big difference too, that it's one of the only professions in the pandemic that had a complete shift in how they do their job.
Mm-hmm.
And I work in an office, so yeah, I'm working remotely, but I'm using my computer. It's email, it's phone calls, and a lot more Zoom. But the way that teachers delivered the material is completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, instead of what we used to call dittos or handouts, now it's
Right.
pair decks and PowerPoints and Google Slides, and
Schoology and
yeah. And
yeah.
then you pile on top of that my wife, who's very animated, and elementary school. She's great at what she does, but she is doing this all day. But the vast majority of the 30 little boxes on her screen are blank.
Right.
So, I mean, just to think about that every single day, all day long, doing this to a blank screen. There's no way to, fully capture how difficult that is. And so, I initially try to give people the benefit of the doubt. So when I
Mm-hmm.
see these comments, I just think they are completely uninformed.
Yep.
They just don't know. Like you said, why don't you come on and substitute for my wife one day and
One
see what
day.
it's like?
Let's see how you do.
And by the way, for your 10 to 12 hours that you work, I'm going to pay you for 7.
Right. Right. And oh, by the way, for the additional technology that you might need, we'll give you the laptop, but
Yeah.
you need to go get A, B, C, D, E, F, and G.
Yeah. I'm sure, probably just like you, when this hit, whatever it was, March 12th or 13th, about last year,
Yep.
within about a week, I had purchased a new computer monitor, multiple extension cords,
Yep.
a whiteboard from Amazon. I mean, we were just scrambling to try to, and that was all for the students.
Yeah.
I mean, really, ultimately, to benefit the students.
Yep.
So,
And you know how hard it was to get a computer monitor at that point too?
exactly.
Holy smoke.
Yep. And
Yeah.
all of that, was done by the teachers.
Yep.
And it infuriates me to hear. I watched a recent board meeting here in Howard County, and they were talking about the more than $10 million that they've invested
Mm-hmm.
in resources for teachers to return. And I'm
They
flabbergasted.
just won't tell you what the $10 million was actually spent on.
Right. And I've joined a few teacher support
Yep.
Facebook groups, and there's thousands of people in these groups. And I see what teachers are posting, and they don't have what they need.
Yep.
My wife, I told her, look, we purchased a monitor. Don't bring that into the school. Let's just leave it at home.
Right.
She went back. This past Wednesday was the first day back. She requested a monitor. They brought it in, and I mean, this thing looks like it was from
When we were in school.
probably the mid 90s. I mean, this thing, it wasn't, it was a square. I would say the screen is smaller than her laptop, and they didn't even provide a cord.
Was it one of the old like tube backings where it had a really deep tube?
Luckily, it wasn't that bad,
Okay.
but it was
It was
pretty bad.
close. Yeah.
And she came home and said, I'm taking the monitor that we bought because, and I just, and I know Baltimore's the same way. Howard County, there's plenty of money in this county, and if we can't get our public school teachers the basic resources they need to do their job, I don't know what we're doing.
Well, and here's the thing. Like I get the side that certain people are having. There is a big concern about students with their socialization and the isolation. And I'm not knocking that at all. It is a legitimate problem and a serious problem. Sure. I will say this. There are so many things that have not been done to help get schools open. And now teachers are being vilified for it because ultimately people say they want to be safe. And all I keep hearing are comparisons to other works. Well, if it's okay for grocery store workers to be back, why can't teachers? Now, I'm not going to take anything away from grocery store workers who have been at their jobs since this started, putting themselves at risk.
Right.
Here's a big difference. Grocery store workers aren't subjected to being into a confined space for 5 to 6 hours with young children who, no matter what you say, you can say, wear a mask. But I remember what it was like being in elementary school. Oh, yeah. We weren't always easy to reason with if we weren't feeling our normal selves, or maybe we just were difficult in general, depending upon. So kids aren't going to always be agreeable to keeping masks on. They're not going to, you can say, you're going to tell a kindergartner not to touch something, or they're wiping their noses, or they're sneezing, or like things are going to happen. And there is no plan of where is their PPE, where is the resources needed to be back in the building to teach. And if you want to compare it to other states, that's what you're not seeing in Maryland right now. Exactly. You're seeing, go back. What's the plan? We'll tell you when we make it.
Yep. I could not agree more. And it's so funny. Like you said, I feel like I'm talking to myself.
Yeah.
But a couple of things on that. I mean, I have 2 kids. I've got a high schooler and a middle schooler. I could want them to get back to school more.
Right.
Like I'm all for it. I get them back. I'm a huge proponent. Let's get them back in school. But you have to have a plan. And the plan, I keep saying to people, I don't know what the school system's been doing for the last year, but once they got virtual learning up and running, I would have thought the number one priority was a return to in-person learning plan.
Yep.
And to hear the questions that teachers are asking, and even administrators saying like, I'm not quite sure yet, we're working on it. And, I watched, there was a board meeting here in Howard County the other week, and there was a lot of, I don't know. They were talking a lot about sports, which I was kind of not sure why we're talking about that.
Yeah.
A lot about, are we having prom? The priorities, I was just like, the rush to reopen without a plan just doesn't make sense. And basic questions, like you said, my wife says, what do I do if a kid will not wear the mask? And the answer here is there's not a whole lot you can do. You can encourage them and teach them why it's important, but there's not a lot you can do. And that blows my mind, because if somebody was, let's say, wearing something inappropriate to school, they would be immediately sent home.
Yep.
And so if a mask is required, I don't see the difference there. But to me, I'm all for reopening. The biggest thing is the lack of a solid plan that drives me crazy. Oh, and sorry to ramble, but the other one of my arguments that you'll hear over and over again if you read online is that there are students that are more vulnerable, either for food scarcity or mental health, which is completely true.
Yep.
And we need to get those students back in the schools, which I agree with. And I've seen some interesting data, because here in Howard County, parents were given the option. You can keep your kid virtual or you can return. And numbers are coming out about the kids that are returning, and the ones that, we were saying really needed to be there and are the most vulnerable are primarily not the ones returning.
That's
So a
interesting.
lot of the ones returning are, in neighborhoods and communities that are more wealthy, more affluent, typically not very diverse, heavily white communities in Howard County. And to me, that, you got to wonder, like, why are we really reopening? Because I don't think that argument really, really works.
And yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I understand the desire. Like but here's the thing that gets lost in all this. Do you want to know who wants schools to reopen more than anybody? Our teachers. This
Right.
this
Yeah.
notion that teachers are happy to be working at home and like it is
It's
crazy. And
crazy.
if you
Right.
truly feel that way, you don't know teachers.
Right. Yep. You
You
nailed it.
don't know a teacher, because you know
Right.
what teachers love? Their students. They love being with their students.
Right.
They do this for their students.
Yeah.
They
You're
do
right.
this job for their students. And to hear the nonsense is crazy. And on the flip side, like you said, there's a lot of people in different communities who are really making this push. And again, I get it, but there are a lot of ways to be creative and solve the
Yep.
socialization issue. So it's always made me wonder, is that the real concern here?
Right. What else is
That's
going
your
on?
real concern, or is it you're tired? I'm not going to, I shouldn't even say it. You're tired of your own kid being around you
Right.
24/7. There's COVID fatigue. Let's
Yeah.
be realistic. We're
I mean,
all exhausted.
it's been a huge impact because not only were parents now had their kids at home, but those same parents are also now working from home.
Right.
And I know, luckily my kids are a little older and a little more self-sufficient, but if our kids were, 2 and 6, something like that, or both in early elementary, I cannot even imagine, what falls on the parents. So I get it. But you nailed it. Nobody could want schools to open more than teachers. And I think the big push and this whole work to rule thing in Howard County that may come to Baltimore, that's the push. We want to open. We just need a solid plan.
Yep.
And the counties have failed to provide that.
Has it occurred to you? I want to transition in a second over to work to rule in a
Yeah.
second, but I'm curious your take on this. I've got some of my own opinions, but I'm curious your take. When you think about everything that's gone on in the last year and the lack of leadership, I'm not talking federal government,
Mhm.
state government, but I'm curious, what is your thought on the leadership or lack of leadership coming from school systems?
Very good question. I do have some thoughts. Not surprising, but one of the things I think on that continues to, it's an interesting piece, is that this ultimately rolls up to the Board of Education.
Yep.
So, most of the people blame teachers. There's a smaller group that likes to blame the superintendent and the county, his office. But ultimately, they all report to the Board of Ed.
Right.
And the Board of Ed is a group of publicly elected citizens.
Sometimes appointed, depending upon the county.
Right. That's right. Yep. And here in Howard County, all you have to do is run. You don't need a background in public education. You just have to run and win. And so, watching the board meetings, I've watched them for years. So this isn't just this past year, but I just keep falling back on, if you truly wanted to do what's best for the students, you would help the teachers.
Yep.
And I've never really seen it be a priority, no matter how much money they have. So yeah, I do, leadership starts at the top, and in this county, it's the Board of Ed. And they say all the right things, sometimes, primarily they say the right things. We love teachers. Teachers are important. The other day you referenced theater early on. They were
Yep.
talking about sports, and we have one student member of the board, and he chimed in with, if we're able to restart sports and indoor sports too, volleyball, cheerleading, why are we not discussing drama and dance and chorus? It's this push to reopen sports.
Yep.
Without talking about anything else. And our youngest students in the county, and helping them get back to school. it kind of shows where their focus is and
Mm-hmm.
what their priorities are. And yeah, so that's a systemic thing that I don't know we can fix, but I think it starts at the top.
Yeah, I mean, there's an overall, I mean, I think, and you're going to have this in any industry. Sometimes the best workers or the best individual employees are not always the best leaders. And
Sure.
there's been so much that's gone on in Baltimore County. One of the things that Howard County didn't have to deal with is back. I think it started the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Baltimore County schools had a ransomware attack.
That's
So
right.
in the midst of this whole thing, everything that teachers and students, I'm not
Mhm.
saying it hasn't impacted students because it impacted them just as much. You're already relearning a whole new way of learning due to the pandemic. Now they get thrown a monkey wrench of there is a ransomware attack. Teachers to this point, having in Baltimore County, haven't even been able to get their W-2s yet, which legally you're supposed to have by like January 31st, I believe.
Wow.
They so and not to just say that, like if anyone was looking to refinance a house right now, they can't get copies of pay stubs,
Right.
or they couldn't. They might, maybe that's fixed. But you had teachers and students now, their devices may have been compromised.
Right.
So they had to switch. And all of a sudden, I know a lot of teachers who are using PCs,
Hmm.
they're given Chromebooks. Now, I didn't know this until that happened because I've never used a Chromebook in my life. I didn't realize a Chromebook was a completely different operating system,
Yep.
and almost none of the tools that teachers use on a regular basis function on a Chromebook.
Yep. Yeah, and same here in Howard County. That's what the students got Chromebooks, and they're actually still working on getting them out to students here a year later. But you're right; it's a completely different platform than a MacBook or a Windows laptop. Um, and like you said, that's what they were given, and it was like good luck.
Godspeed. Yep.
Yeah,
So let's transition a little bit. I mean, you and I could probably sit here and talk about this for 10 hours.
absolutely.
Lord knows I'd be thrilled to do that. But I want to I want to transition a little bit because a big piece of your article, uh, and again, I apologize if that's insulting it, but you
No, it's a
focus
compliment,
on
huge compliment.
I mean, it was fabulously written. I mean, I would say to a degree, it's a piece of artwork, and it
Thank
was
you.
what needed to be said, and
Mm,
it needs to be, that story needs to keep getting told. And there's a lot of stories that need to get told, but this story on teachers, and there's a piece here, which if you don't mind, I want to just read for a second, a couple of
please.
lines that you wrote. Hey, while I have your attention, are you not yet on board with teachers or are you not yet on board with the teachers are underpaid adage? Here's why it's more than just a talking point. In Howard County, the starting salary for a teacher is $48,519, and the highest salary attainable after earning a master's degree, a doctorate, and 25 years of service is $104,874. So if a teacher works under these extreme expectations for 25 years and earns a master's and a doctorate, the best they can do under their contract is increase their salary at a meager rate of $2,254 per year. And then you pointed out arguably less than the annual increase in cost of living.
Hmm.
That is a travesty. And then you included the salary scale
Hmm.
for Howard County public school teachers, and Baltimore County, it's not far off.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to me about that, and then let's talk a little bit about the work to rule concept and what that's about. But share with me a little bit about the salary piece that you shared, and then how it equates to work to rule.
Yeah, the salary, I mean, travesty was the best word I could think of. Seeing what I've seen over the past, 2 decades. But there's two issues I have when it comes to the salary. The first is how low it is,
Mm-hmm.
and the second is that it's chiseled in stone.
Yep.
So I know in many industries, coming out of a 4-year undergraduate degree, with that debt, and then you add in the expectations of a brand new teacher. If you were, given a salary of 48,000, first of all, you probably can't even afford to live in Howard County on that
Right.
salary, which is amazing. So you're going to teach here and you probably can't afford to live here. And no matter what you do or how hard you work or how great of a teacher you are only eligible for the chiseled in stone increase that's in that the link that I provided, which is publicly available.
Yep.
And so that it's so frustrating to know that you're just taking these little tiny incremental steps. And even if, like I said, if you do everything you possibly could do, you are capped out at 104,000. And not to poo-poo that number, but given that that's after 25 years, a master's and a doctorate, it's just mind-boggling that's where you hit the ceiling. And so it's way too low, especially in a county as wealthy as Howard County, and there's no flexibility. There should be some kind of performance incentive. They can't get bonuses. You can't get overtime. There's nothing a teacher could do. And so, as we mentioned, they're doing it out of their commitment to the students.
Yep.
And we should compensate them for it.
And talk to me about that. So they have their salaries, they're collectively bargained. Right. There's restrictions on teachers, though, especially in this state. They're not allowed to strike.
Right.
That's supposedly illegal. Mm-hmm. And I'll take the words of everyone who's ever told me that. Going back to a work to rule situation that happened in Howard County when we were in middle school. And we'll get to that in a minute. But talk to me about that contract, because they have a salary, and per their contract, that salary is for a specific amount of hours per day over the course of the school year.
That's right. Yeah. And as you pointed out earlier, this is a 10-month salary. So if you look at the salary schedules, it is for 10-month employees.
Yep.
Certain counties will allow you to stretch it, so that you're
to actually get paid over the
actually
summer.
Get paid.
Right. Have that option.
Exactly. Yep. But these salary schedules and the teacher's employment contract are negotiated between the Board of Ed and the teachers union.
Yep.
And that's it. So now there are probably many teachers in the union, that are there, but you don't have the teachers really at the table. And it just seems like the teachers are just waiting on the sideline, to hear what their salary is going to be. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, the cost of living, typically goes up at least 2 to 3% a year.
Right.
And that's barely the increase that they're getting. And so, it's when I say chiseled in stone, I mean, that is your employment contract.
Yep.
So if you're a teacher, that's the salary you're signing up for. And to me, it's amazing that teachers will still go above and beyond.
Always.
I mean, no matter what you pay them, they're going to do what's best for the students. But I really think we've hit a point where teachers deserve to get paid for the hours they put in. And I know you asked me about this. So in Howard County, I believe their contract pays them for 7.5 hours a day. And then they get a 30-minute duty-free lunch, which is supposed to be a 30-minute break.
Yep.
Typically what I hear from my wife is maybe she will scarf down a granola bar.
Sounds about right.
Something quickly, an apple maybe, but there's no such thing as a duty-free break. She's working from the second she walks in to the second she leaves, and the 7.5 hours they're paid for, I would say, is laughable. I mean, I can't think of another word, but you want to pay them the rate that you're paying them. My argument in what I wrote was pay them the same amount, but pay them for 10 hours instead of the 7.5. I don't know any teacher that works 7.5 hours. That's, you couldn't do the job. It's impossible.
Right.
And so that's probably a good segue into work to rule.
Definitely is. Well done. You went to law school at one point, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well transitioned there, counselor.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. So, all right. So work to rule. Here's my understanding of it. And so maybe I'll screw it up, but basically the concept behind it is you work to what your contract is. So if it's 7.5 hours, 7 hours, 6.5 hours, when the day is done, the old SAT words, pencils down, eyes
Yeah.
up.
Right.
That's it. Get up and leave. I, is that basically the
That's
general gist?
that's basically it. And it runs counter to everything that a teacher does. I
Yep.
mean, I can't even tell you how difficult this has been. But and I will share, I don't love the name work to rule because I think it doesn't quite explain it, but it's essentially
No,
work to
definitely
the
doesn't.
contract.
Right.
So, this is your contract, this is what you're paid for. The teachers here in Howard County are saying that's what we're going to do. This is what you're paying during those hours. We're going to work like crazy, and then that's it. So the union has banded together. As you said, I guess it's illegal to strike,
Yep.
which I have some thoughts about that, but
Yeah.
so the best they can do is, I'm calling this, it's like a protest.
Yeah.
And so what happens, it's a pretty incredible. The teachers will all drive to work, a couple minutes before their start time. I'll say here, elementary school, let's just say it's about 8 a.m. All of the teachers wait in their cars in the parking lot. And at 8:15, they all hop out of their cars and walk into the building together. It's something I've sort of been like hoping to see for such a long time. And they work like crazy while they're there. And then at about, 3:45, depending on the school schedule,
Yep.
they all, they gather together, they all go around, get their teammates, and they march right out of the building.
Yep.
Now, first of all, I've been asking my wife for years to just work to her contract because, it's what she's paid for. But
Yeah.
that's,
How'd that work out?
yeah, not well. I gave
Yeah.
up. But that's the way the system has decided to set itself up, and it's how they pay the teachers. And it's really incredible to see them actually putting this into practice. And I've heard people say, oh, this is going to impact the students, and I can't believe the teachers are doing this. And oh, those unions, again, blaming the teachers.
Right.
This is on the Board of Ed. The Board of Ed, this is the teacher's contract. So, and my argument
This is
is
what you're paying
basically,
them for.
yeah, anyone that says this is, not fair and it's falling on the students, your issue is actually with the Board of Ed.
Right.
And the contract that they've forced on the teachers. And so, yeah, I could not support the work to rule thing more. It's really hard, and it will impact the students.
Right.
It's just going to, and it's really sad. And the teachers are still going to do the best they can. But it's about time that they,
Right.
stood up as a collective and said it's not fair.
Yeah. And it's, if you think about it, you talk about that 30-minute duty-free break, which, let's be realistic, at the beginning of it and the end of it, especially in elementary school, not to take anything away from middle school and high school, but in elementary school, you're escorting your students to wherever they're going and wherever they're coming from. So it's not really 30 minutes.
Right.
You shave off 5 on each end. It's actually 20 minutes.
Yep. And you're spending it planning for when they come back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or, I mean, the one thing when we were growing up, there was an email and constant communication and constant communications that parents could have. I mean, I've seen my wife get emails from parents at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday. And I've actually seen it had it told to me that there's actually a line in this email that says, we'd appreciate a response before the end of the day on a Saturday. Now, let's take that out for a minute, because you made a great point. There's a lot of blame that's already starting to come onto teachers, onto unions.
Mm-hmm.
And what people really need to realize is what teachers are asking for is not unreasonable. It's
Right.
not unreasonable in the time of a pandemic to ask to understand what the returning to the building plan is. And if you're going to sit there and say, well, the science tells us that it mostly isn't transmitted with students, it may not be given to and from other students, but it can be transmitted from students to teachers
And back to their families.
and back to their families,
Mhm.
or from teachers to students back to their families, or parents, teachers.
Yep.
It's going to be hard for people. So to say that it's not right of teachers to be asking for a detailed plan is ridiculous. Then to say, well, teachers are hurting students if they're going to do a work to rule. I'm going to ask anybody this: how many people on a day in and day out basis, and in the case of your wife, in the case of my wife, and in the case for a lot of teachers that I know, for 20 and 25 years, are going to consistently, day in and day out, do anywhere from an extra 3 to 7 hours
Yep.
per day for no additional compensation? I want to know every other line of work where there is that.
Yep. And that was one of the things I mentioned was I don't think there's another profession, at least in America, that demands, I mean, literally demands and requires
Yep.
so much volunteer work.
Yep.
And anybody that makes that argument, related to work to rule, that you're going to hurt the students and, when are they going to return to normal and, get back to their regular hours? What you're essentially asking the teachers to do is to volunteer their own time, which they've been doing. And they're finally saying, if this is the level of planning that the county is going to do for us when it comes to our health and our safety, then it's not fair that we are being asked to volunteer that many hours. And that's why I fully support it. And, I'll, at one of the recent board meetings here, I was listening in, and there was a whole long discussion about which metrics the county was going to follow. And, I did get into it a little on Facebook with some random person because it pushed me over the edge. But one of the arguments I made was that it's not a matter of the teachers wanting to return or not, or it's not even a should we reopen or not. It's the constantly moving goalpost that the Board of Ed has. And here in Howard County, several months ago, they voted and they decided we're just going to remain virtual through the third quarter. That way, everyone knows what's happening. We can prepare, and fourth quarter, we'll take a look at the metrics and see where we are. And whether you like that or not, at least we knew the lay of the land.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly, it was, you know what? We're going to reopen March 1st, and we're actually not going to look at the metrics anymore. We're just going to reopen.
Yep.
And the other night at the board meeting, just this past week, there was a whole long discussion about, should we be following the Howard County Health Department metrics, the Maryland State metrics, or the CDC community transmission,
Right.
whatever it was. And, they were making motions and voting. And here in Howard County, students go back Monday. And it was absolutely mind-boggling that they were trying to decide last week what metrics they should be following.
Right.
To determine, it's very much the cart before the horse.
Yep.
We're just going to reopen because,
Right.
So yeah, it's just the lack of a plan is really, really what gets me.
I think what really is frustrating to me too, I want to say it was about a month ago, the governor of Maryland, and Larry Hogan gets a lot of praise for a lot of his handling,
Sure.
A lot of which I've agreed with, some not so much. But about a month ago, he basically held a press conference and threatened teachers, threatened taking licenses, threatened termination. And I couldn't for the
Hmm.
life of me figure out why. And I think what's really irritated me, again, as a spouse of a public school teacher, where was the outcry and the support
Hmm.
when that happened?
It's a great point.
Or because if you go back a year ago, everyone was lauding teachers as heroes,
Teachers are heroes.
as
Yep.
they should have been.
Yep.
But why now are they not? Because they value their safety and the safety of students. They want to know what the plan is, and one of the big keys with COVID are ventilation systems.
Yeah.
And I will bet none of these schools have had major updates to their ventilation system to the standards
Right.
that the CDC has, because quite frankly, in Baltimore County, they still don't even have air conditioning in some of these schools.
Wow.
My wife would work my the worst time of year in my household up until a couple years ago was about May 20th till the end of the school year. And then when teachers went back in mid-August, no AC in that building.
Wow.
And and now they don't even have a true AC. It's
Hmm.
cooler and it's much more tolerable, but not every school in Baltimore County yet has air conditioning.
Jeez.
So you mean to tell me that all of a sudden in 12 months, every ventilation system has been updated to meet standards that will help reduce the spread of COVID-19? I don't buy
Right.
it, and no one's talking about it.
Hmm.
So where was the support for teachers when Governor Hogan literally threatened,
Hmm.
I'm going to go after teacher certifications and licenses. I'll go after teachers' jobs.
Yep. Yeah, and
Why?
that's not an exaggeration. Like for anybody not local that didn't, or if you didn't see the press conference, I mean, you're not exaggerating. And Hogan has since sort of walked it back and no, that wasn't my intention. But he pretty clearly said, other districts in other states are doing this. They're doing this and that and pulling certifications. And, don't worry, I'm not going to do that. But I mean, it was pretty
He didn't say it
clearly a
that
threat.
day. He
Yeah,
didn't
pretty
say it that
clearly.
day at all. He said,
Right.
I'll do everything within my power under the
Yep.
law.
That's right. Right. And
Now he's pulled back because the teachers had to raise their voice. But where was the support?
right. And there's supposedly a level of autonomy with counties that, the state cannot mandate certain things, that it's ultimately up to the county boards of ed. But, and that's nice to say, but ultimately, if the Maryland State Department of Education, demands something, likely the boards are gonna
Figure it
react.
out. Yeah.
But yeah, ever since, and here in Howard County, they had been following for a year a pretty routine review of metrics, and they had sort of these guidelines of when we would reopen.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a whole bunch of different things about community transmission, positivity rates,
Yep.
all kinds of stuff like that. And they even had nice little colors. There was 5 different colors from green to red.
Right.
And it was, well, we can't open until we're, whatever. And after that press conference, all of that was out the
Out the
window.
window. Yep.
We're not even going to look at metrics. March 1st, we are reopening.
Yep.
And there's just a huge lack of a plan, and nobody can figure out what the rush is.
Right.
And I agree. Mental health is a huge issue, and same with food scarcity. And we have a lot of kids that are really, really struggling, which is why I would have said 10 months ago, let's come up with a detailed, safe plan. And one other little tidbit here, the board here was touting all of the PPE that they've given to teachers in Howard County. We've spent, I mean, it's millions that they've spent on PPE. That is at least what they say. And the teachers here were given 2 cloth masks,
2,
and 1 face shield. And I saw a video online in one of my teacher, pro teacher groups.
Yeah.
Somebody put the mask on, with a little tea light candle 2 feet away and was able to blow out the candle. And
Nice.
this teacher said that he had to put on 4 of the cloth masks for the air to not be able to blow through. And so stuff like that just boggles your mind when you see our county showing up on like wealthiest counties in the country lists. And, we're asking so much of the teachers and not giving them the bare minimum that they need to safely do their jobs.
And not even that, they're not getting the information either.
Yeah.
I mean, the lack of leadership, and I'll speak more on my county. I mean, the lack of leadership from the superintendent and the Board of Education in Baltimore County is laughable at best. I mean, back in the fall, Darrell Williams, who's the superintendent of Baltimore County, sends a blanket email to basically everybody that schools are going to be reopening, never bothered to inform anybody in advance, just basically made a unilateral decision.
Wow.
Never told anybody. And it's, well, how's it going to happen? Well, now that we have the date, now we're going to make the plan.
Yep.
The date
Cart
was in
before the
like
horse.
2 weeks. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's easy to make a plan.
Right.
Like, we're not talking something easy. And I think the entire country right now is learning how challenging it is to make a distribution plan, for example, in regards to the vaccine. But there's no plan and there's no communication. And, people, the expectation for teachers in most counties that I'm aware of is if they get a communication from a parent or even a student, that they reply within 24 hours.
Right.
That's the expectation.
Yep.
That expectation is not honored by leadership, especially at that higher level. They may make something, and if teachers were to reach out to the superintendent, he's not responding back. They have to go through their union. So people are saying all these unions, if teachers didn't have a union, they have no voice.
Absolutely. And there were two things that are
the unions have a tough job. I do think they need to do better. And I think this is the opportunity where they're saying we are going to do better.
Yeah, exactly.
And let's transition back to work to rule for a minute, because when you and I were in middle school together a couple of years ago, I remember it actually vividly. There was an article in it was probably the Columbia Flyer or the Howard County Times at our middle school of our teachers walking out the door. I believe it was 1991, where they were doing work to rule. I even remember the teachers talking about it with us,
right,
explaining what was going on. I don't remember caring. I mean, my mindset was probably, cool, I won't find out about a bad grade quick.
Right.
That's probably my mindset. Not that I was a bad student, but I certainly wasn't the best. But it's been like 30 years since it's been done. So it's not something that's done often. If maybe it's once a generation, but for everyone who's talking about the impact that it's going to have on students, everybody turned out okay.
Yep.
There is not any long-term damage, because for a period of time, teachers are going to do or have chosen to do what they have been contracted to do, no more, no less. And maybe, just maybe, that's going to be the wake-up call for people to understand just how much it is that teachers do after the school day is over and before it begins, because everything that's done during the day is time with their students. So grading papers is basically taking place off the clock. Designing lesson plans taking place off the clock. Decorating rooms off the clock. By the way, out of their pocketbooks. Well, all of this stuff is stuff teachers do because they love teaching, they love their students, and all they want to do is be in the classroom. So when you think about work to rule, I can think about two people on this conversation. One of us went to law school. The other one of us has an MBA.
Mhm.
I think we did okay while teachers looked out for
Apparently,
themselves for a small period of time. Because if people really think work to rule will last forever,
yeah,
I can only imagine what it's got to be like for your wife to actually go through with it. Because I know your
yeah,
wife. I know what her work ethic
mhm.
is. I know what her attitude is. I know what my wife's work ethic is. If they do it in Baltimore County, I'm gonna probably have to chain her to the couch so she won't actually do it. Because
Right,
that's how they're wired. You said
yeah,
it best. Teachers are wired to do this. They are wired because they care. They care about teaching. They care about educating. They care about their students, and they care about the impact, and they understand the
mhm.
impact that they are having on the lives of every student who comes into their classroom. And teachers have had to learn to cope with so much, whether it's the tragedies that have happened in different schools and being able to answer those questions from their students. What
Yep.
if that happens here? To figuring out what they're going to do, figuring out how to adjust to COVID, how to learn how to teach in a completely different style on the fly, transition back in, now going to hybrid, back into schools, and then what's and then what do they get for it as a thank you is they get told your vacation's
Yeah,
over.
right, right. It's a really good point. And it is sad to think that this happened in 1991 and it's still going on. They're still fighting just to get basic, respect
Respect.
and the salary that they've earned. Um, but
And the resources they need.
yeah, basic resources.
Yeah.
And one thing I didn't really talk about in my post, but it's the teachers, like you said, that are there with our children when horrible things happen,
Yep.
whether it's 9/11. I mean, my
Yep.
wife was in her classroom,
Yep.
and they are having to explain what's going on. The Challenger explosion was
Challenger,
another
right?
example, but they're now with the drills, active shooter drills,
Yep.
and there's social and emotional issues and mental health issues, and
Yep.
the amount of stuff that, I mean, teachers are social workers and nurses and caretakers, and there's so much more.
Therapists. Yeah.
Therapists, yeah, exactly. I mean, there's my wife has had students that are homeless
Mm-hmm.
and that have no food, and just the range of things that fall on the teachers. And one of the other interesting takeaways from our Howard County Board of Ed meeting last week that I found fascinating, number one, was they stopped at, I think it was 6:30 p.m. on the dot to take their dinner break,
Yes.
which I thought was very interesting because I wanted to say, look, teachers don't stop. As a board, you've got stuff to do. I don't, like, why are you stopping?
Right.
And they probably would have said something like, well, our bylaws require us. And I would have
Yes.
said,
Infamous
just like
bylaws.
the teachers have a contract too. And the other fascinating thing is that the board meeting was virtual. And this was a day
Right.
or two after the teachers had returned to the building. And here are the leaders, the Board of Ed, all on a Zoom.
Yep.
Um, and two of there was one or two, I believe, that were actually at the Board of Ed, but the majority, I kept questioning, why are they not in person if it's safe to reopen? They can go and be socially distanced, and they can wear their masks, and so again, more is falling on the teachers
Yep.
than fall on the leaders putting them in the situation.
Isn't that ironic that the teachers were already back in their buildings mandated and the Board of Ed is sitting on Zoom?
Right. Yep. And they, no masks. And here, and another thing I'll add with Zoom is the argument of the impact on work to rule to students. Why that fails immediately
Yep.
is my wife has been here, sitting right where I'm sitting for a
Right.
year, teaching just like this. You can hear me pretty clearly. You can see everything. Starting Monday, she will now have two masks on her face, and I don't have a
Right.
mask here, but so her voice will be muffled.
Yep.
You will not be able to see her smile.
Right.
She will also be trying to deal with the in-person students
Yep.
that she has in her room along with the virtual, so this concurrent teaching. And so if you truly cared about, you know, the impact on the students,
Yep.
this is actually going to, I think, be worse. I
Mm-hmm.
think students are going to struggle to hear the teachers. They're going to lose that connection because you can't see them. Teachers are they're now having to, focus in two different areas with concurrent teaching. So just a lot of the arguments I see just immediately fall flat.
Yeah, and it's tough to look in any profession. Virtual's tough because when you're on a Zoom call, and look, no one out there hold me to technicalities. It could be Schoology, it could be Microsoft Teams, any
Yep.
sort of virtual conference or virtual interaction. It's tough enough just to focus on the people you're talking to.
Right.
You also now have some of your students in their build in front of you, but they have to stay seated at their desks.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Right.
like they can interact the way they used to,
Yep.
um, from a
And the,
from a protocol standpoint.
yeah, and the number of issues that we have asked, one that comes to mind, you said the students are seated at their desk.
Right.
Well, my kids sit at their desk here in the house all day with their Chromebook plugged in.
Yep.
And I can verify if that thing isn't plugged in, it's going to last
An
2 to 3 hours
maybe.
max. And my wife's classroom has two outlets, maybe. And I keep wondering, like, where are these kids going to
There's
charge up
probably a
their Chromebooks?
50% chance those outlets aren't going to work either.
Right. And now the teachers they need plugs for their laptops, the extra monitors, the little, we used to call them the projectors, all the
Yes,
stuff they need.
whatever those are called now.
Yeah, whatever they're called now.
Yeah.
Um, and so the buildings, again, it's just another thing that was not thought through.
Yep. And why look, wiring's tough. I was grateful when we switched to working from home. I know how to do some of this stuff because of my business within electronics and tech. So the wiring was never hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sitting there thinking the average Joe isn't going to know how to do this. The average
Right.
person's not going to know how to connect a laptop to an external monitor and then split it in such a way
Yep.
so you can have an extended. Person's not going to understand about, hey, you might need a powered hub in order
Right.
to plug all these different devices into, and now we're going back into the classroom where the kids in the room have to be on their devices. And like you said, what are you going to do now? Are we running extension cords, power
Yep.
strips? You can only have but so much plugged into a circuit before it trips. And I know plenty
Yep.
about that.
And is every school's Wi-Fi ready to have several hundred people on a Google Meet? Like, we had to upgrade our Wi-Fi here at home because we've usually got 4 Google Meets or Zooms happening all day.
Nonstop.
Good luck with the school Wi-Fi with every single kid on that Google Meet or whatever it is. And I haven't heard anything about that either. What happens when the Wi-Fi is glitchy, as I've heard my wife's students say, you're glitchy. Yeah, it's just another aspect of this that would have been, it's ultimately going to hurt the students, when the Wi-Fi isn't good.
We had an outage here one day and we turned a cell phone into a hotspot to get my wife back with her kids as quickly as possible. There was nothing we could do. The entire grid was out for a period. I think we were out for 3 hours.
Okay.
So I hit the road and went to my office and was the only one. It was like a ghost town. It was kind of weird, but I was like, all right, for one day, that's
right.
fine. And she, meanwhile, because we both couldn't be on hotspots at that point, trying to stream because we're on the same account. So that wasn't going to fly. And those are the types of things people do. Look, everyone's had to deal with virtual, but you talk about expenses. What if a teacher didn't have home Wi-Fi because their mindset is, well, I'm on the computer all day. now you have, that's happened to everybody. So that's not limited to teachers, but there's
Mhm.
no, if you're a starting teacher at that salary you talked about, I mean, I remember what apartments cost in Howard County when I was living in one back in the early part of 2007.
Mhm.
So I know what I was paying then to live on my own, and I can do math pretty well. I mean, it was $1,600 a month,
Right.
and so that's after taxes. That's a lot, and then Wi-Fi is not cheap.
No. Yeah,
So
you got to upgrade. I know. And the Wi-Fi, the extra monitors, extension cords, and power
HDMI
surges.
cables, yep,
Yeah, just getting the right. That's another thing. We just had to use our own cable because they didn't have the right monitors. And I mean, the list just never ends. From
yep,
how is the county doing contact tracing? Like when a student tests positive, what happened? What's the protocol? Does the whole class then quarantine? Does this like the school do it? How will we be contacted as parents to know, if a kid has either, been exposed or tested positive? There's so many questions,
yep,
and the schools are opening, like, and
right,
those districts from other states that have already opened, that's great, and I'm sure they have all of that stuff figured out. We
maybe,
don't.
right,
We just don't have it figured out yet, and that's why the work to rule is happening. So
yeah. But the blame game has got to stop. The finger pointing at teachers has got to stop.
yeah.
And a couple days ago, I was watching WBAL News, and they were talking about this clash between teachers and students and parents, and you see a whole group of teachers in cars and
Mm-hmm.
like five or six parents and teachers with a couple of signs. And again, I'm sympathetic to people wanting to be back in the classroom because teachers want to be back there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think anyone should be vilified
Right.
because they want to understand a plan, they want to understand the process, they want to understand that there is the appropriate PPE. Because as much as we'd all like to say, hey, all teachers should be vaccinated before they go back to the classroom, it's not happening.
It's not going
A,
to happen.
a
Yep.
lot of people, I don't even know if I could say a lot will. I know some do,
Mm-hmm.
but not everybody does.
Nope. My wife, she's got her first dose, which is great, but
Right.
her second dose isn't for another 2 weeks.
Couple weeks.
So she will be back before that second dose, and even after that, I think you're not fully.
It's like 2 weeks after
Yeah,
that
two
or
weeks even
something.
after the second dose.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I've seen teachers having to prep their students, and when you think about kindergartners,
Mm-hmm.
these little kids, are so vulnerable, and teachers are trying to teach them. They're showing them what their mask is going to look like, and
Yep.
when you see me on screen starting Monday,
Here's
this
how
is
it's
what I'm
going to
going to look like. And by the way, in Howard County, I don't know if you knew this fun little tidbit, they are also changing the schedule. So this whole let's do what's best for the students, they've pretty much been on the same schedule all school year. They're used to it. They're in a routine. They're in the groove.
And
And
Monday's March 1st, by the way.
yeah, and it's right,
Right.
March 1st. And you know what? Some kids don't do well at is changing routines. So you want to talk about hurting our most vulnerable. Um, my son, who's in high school, virtual learning, it's all been starting at 9 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
So you know how it is for high schoolers. You roll out of bed at 8:50, and you're
That
there.
early?
Well, starting Monday, high school starts at 7:45,
Ouch.
and once they return, his bus is showing up at 7 a.m.
Ouch.
So he'll adjust and he'll be fine. But to do that mid
Here.
quarter, right in the middle of it's such an abrupt change, and we've been bombarded with emails from the county. Don't forget, it's a completely new schedule. Everyone's schedule is changing, elementary, middle, and high school. Um, and I feel so bad for the teachers and the students who finally were in a groove, and like they had sort of gotten into a routine, and it's just all being thrown into the air now.
Yeah. I better apologize real quick too. I singled out WBAL. I can't say for sure it was them. So if it was one of the other local TV stations, my apologies to WBAL. I just normally watch BAL local news,
Right,
so that's why I
right.
assumed it was them. But I don't want to get accused of slandering any of the news
That's
organizations.
fair.
Let me ask you this question, and then we'll start to wrap up. So if you could have an open mic to anyone in the county, the state government, the media, what's your message to them?
Really good question. My message would be that work to rule should just be work. The fact that work to rule is some big protest that's really controversial um, really sort of boggles the mind because they're just working to their contract. And so, my message to leadership in the county and to the state would be if you want to continue to pile these expectations onto teachers, modify their contract and pay them for it. And teachers will do it. If you want them to work 12-hour days, they will. Just pay them for it.
Yep.
And so, I've been telling a lot of teachers that I know, I wish work to rule was just work, just regular work. Right. I'm paid for 7.5 hours. That's what I'll work. It's just so unfortunate that we've gotten to this point, and it's the system. I blame the public education system.
Yeah, and it's gotten out of control over the years.
Yeah,
which has led to this point, and you see other things. This isn't limited to Maryland. This is not limited to Howard County. It's not limited to Baltimore County. There are challenges and concerns all across the country. And the one thing that I implore everybody is to, number one, take a deep breath and take a step back, because everyone has been through what we've all been through for the last year.
Yep.
And it's been hard. It's been challenging for everybody. But we've got to get out of this finger pointing mentality and why all of a sudden the target has been painted and placed on teachers, and the accusations and the flat out lies of teachers need to get back to work or
Right.
they've been on vacation couldn't be further from the truth. I'm looking at your wife's classroom right now. And it is a classroom. If you didn't tell me it was your basement, I would have actually believed you if you said, I'm actually in her school building, because that is a classroom. I know what my wife's classroom in our house looks like. And I also know I don't go anywhere near it because I'm like a bull in a china shop, and I'll break something or damage something because that's my klutzy nature.
Right.
So I just stay out of there. But it is a classroom and teacher, and there are a lot for everything that's out there about kids who are struggling, and we're not going to take anything away from that. And we do have to solve for that. There are a lot of kids thriving.
There are
plenty, lots of kids learning and having success.
There are.
And we'll continue to have success one way or the other. And we want to get everyone back into school, but we want everyone to be safe. We want a plan. And from work, because I like that work, it shouldn't be work to rule. It should be work.
Yeah.
Needs to be done safely, but needs to be done equitably. And people need to be for the work that they are doing. No one's asking for back pay. No one's saying, let's go back. I mean, it would be nice, but
sure.
It's not going to happen. But why is it a problem that while teachers are getting vilified for everything, they're saying, well, wait a second, here's what we do. Here's what we're supposed to do. So we're going to go do what we're supposed to do.
Right. And they get called lazy and
on vacation.
Right. Yep. And you put yourself, ultimately, the argument is put yourself in their shoes, and whatever your job is, whether it's even if you're a stay-at-home parent, I mean, whatever you do, imagine if you were asked to do it, constantly asked to do it much better and for longer hours.
Yep.
If you have a job and you're paid for what you do, and your boss came to you and said, look, I know you're working an 8-hour shift. We need you from now on to work 10 hours every day. And by the way, when you get home, we also need you to do a whole bunch of work in preparation. And we need you to do that every day. But unfortunately, we can't pay you for it.
Correct.
You would quit immediately.
Yep.
And so this is just, for some reason, this is the profession that just never gets the respect and the pay that they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And there are so many hardworking teachers all across this country, this
Yeah,
state, and all they want to do is educate the
they do.
future of this country.
Yeah, and I know there's groups out there on social media that are, I would say, anti-teacher, but join one that's pro-teacher. I mean, I've seen the teachers want to get back so badly.
Yep.
I mean, my wife has never met her students in
Right.
person. I mean, think about that.
Right.
These are little kids, and they want to teach. They want to do what is best for the kids.
Yep.
Um, and they're trying. They're trying so hard. And these support groups are amazing. They're full of parents that say, give teachers what they've earned.
Yep.
They're not asking for more than they deserve.
Nope.
They just want the basics, basic resources, respect, and a fair salary.
And respect goes a long way. And I think for a lot of people who are out there who are, look, no one's going to change their mind because of anything I say or anything you say if they're hell bent on schools reopening and
Mhm.
that's how they feel. That is one thing, but don't vilify the people who are educating the
Right.
children
That's right.
because they're not naive to how the systems work. They're not naive to the conditions of their buildings. They're not naive to the conditions of the PPE.
Right.
And I would love to know what $19 million was spent on that you mentioned to me, that you mentioned a little earlier.
I'd love to know
Um, I'd
because I'm
love to
not.
see some invoices, and
Yeah,
I'd love
I'm
to
not
see
seeing it
what it was.
because I know what my property taxes are here in Howard County, and I know the majority goes to education. So I'd love to
Yeah,
see that. And
yeah,
I'll say this too. I mean, it's been 20 some years I've been witnessing. I think in what I wrote, I said I have a front row seat.
yes,
For 20 years. I've never had a better seat because my wife's here all day, and I have never seen her work harder
right.
because of the move to virtual. So to say that this has given teachers a break or a vacation,
Huh.
there are kids that are more vulnerable that she's calling to check in on.
Yep,
If a kid does not log in to the Google Meet, she's trying to reach out to the parents, like, "Hey, is
yep,
little Johnny okay? He wasn't there." Anybody that's falling behind on their work, she's following up with them, providing extra resources that she is creating from scratch. I mean, so and as special as I think my wife is, they're all doing that.
hmm,
All the teachers are going above and beyond. And I think that the people saying otherwise are just uninformed.
uninformed. Yeah, and I
Yep.
think you said it best. You've had a front row seat just as I have,
Yeah.
and to see it, I've been saying when people ask me how's your wife doing, how's she handling virtual learning, my wife took the mindset of, for the time being, I can't do anything about it other than to make it the absolute best
Yeah.
experience. And I've watched those same behaviors, that increased level of effort that
Right.
you've seen from your wife, that fire inside to help kids
Yep.
succeed. I mean, it's almost a privilege to be able to
Yeah.
say I've gotten the chance to watch it, because I never would have otherwise. I never would have been able to just say, "Hey, I want to come sit in your classroom today while
Yeah.
you're teaching." She'd be like, "Yeah, that's not happening." Um,
Well, you're right. Cause I mean, I think I mentioned, I've never been more proud to say my wife is a teacher.
yep,
Couldn't be prouder. And I hear, because I'm here in our basement and I work remotely just above here.
right.
And I hear the students and I hear
Yeah,
them laughing and learning and reading together. And, my wife will change something on the wall and the kids will be like, "Oh my gosh, there's a new thing on you." I mean, they're so engaged.
yep,
Um, and it's really inspirational to hear it.
Yep.
It's
I mean,
amazing.
I saw what my wife and her colleague did to make graduation
Yeah,
special for the kids finishing up elementary school
yeah,
last year. They couldn't have it the way everyone else has, but I watched them plan
yeah,
and put something together so they would have a memory they'd never forget.
yep.
And and all of these teachers are doing that constantly for
Every day.
anything and everything.
Yep, every day, 10, 12, 14 hours a day.
Yep.
And as I mentioned, my wife started getting emails at 9 a.m. this morning.
Yep.
And weekends, evenings, it never ends.
Yep.
And so, which is fine. Let's just pay them for it.
Yeah. And look, are you ever going to pay anyone the true, are they ever going to get paid truly what they're doing? No, like it's probably just not possible.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, it shouldn't take something like
Yeah.
a work to rule type scenario for it to be rated
Mm-hmm.
and to understand that, hey, for someone who's been in this industry for 25 years, has a master's degree and has a doctorate, has a cap on
Yep.
what they can earn. And you know what's funny? Half the people who are probably saying, too bad they get their summers off, are probably the same people saying, hey, pay that professional athlete what they want. They've earned it. Well,
Exactly.
teachers have earned it.
Yep. They have.
Teachers have earned it. And
Yep.
where is the waste money going? You know, you look at Maryland, we won't get on this soapbox, but we open casinos. I don't see more money coming to school systems.
That's
Now we're
right.
talking about opening sports gambling, which I'm all for. You know, I'm glad that that stuff's here. Not that I'd bet, because I'd bet with my heart and I'd lose. But
Right.
if people are going to gamble, they may as well stay in state and spend their money
Sure.
here versus go to Delaware or West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
But why isn't that money free flowing to school systems the way
Right.
it's supposed to from casinos? Because the money's there. It's
It's
how it's
there.
being chose to be spent.
Yep.
And the last thing that I'll say, there's a lot of money paid to a lot of people in leadership positions in school systems, ridiculous amounts.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go by the former superintendent in Baltimore County who was making $275,000 when he had to step down because he was ultimately still lying about extracurricular
Right.
monies he was, and he went to jail for it. So I'm not
Mm-hmm.
slandering him. $275,000 a year plus pension contributions out the wazoo. And we've got teachers who are working full time, teaching full time, getting themselves through masters and doctorates, and they're capped, at least in Howard County, at
Yep.
$104,000.
We had a similar thing here with and I'd have to do some research before it, so I'll get the details. But yeah, our former superintendent of schools left, and we'll get into all that. But the terms of her leaving is that Howard County would continue to pay her salary,
Yep.
which I think is $250,000
Yep.
that we are giving to someone who doesn't even work for the county anymore.
Yep.
And just when you hear things like that, and the reports that they're paying for, and experts that they bring in to analyze things, and the amount of money that's wasted, that just give teachers a fair share of it so they have the resources and that they need.
And you can
It's
save
so
a heck of a
frustrating.
lot of money from bringing in these experts by talking to the experts that you have, what works and what doesn't work.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
So, well, so you and I got together today because there's a lot of us out there. We are spouses of teachers, public school teachers, and there are a lot of us out there. And I think the one thing that Jeremy and I both talked about, both off air and while we're talking, is just the amount of support and notice, recognition that we can help bring to the table. So if you're out there and you know a teacher, have friends who are teachers, are married to a teacher, brother or sister, we need your help making as much noise as possible to help support teachers, help support the people who are coming to educate the future of this country, the
Mm-hmm.
future of this state, and help get them the recognition and the fairness and the respect that they deserve. And that's where Jeremy and I felt, and my hat again is off to you for what you wrote, what was said, and with your permission, I'll post it on the page underneath
Please. Hmm.
of this podcast, because I can't tell you enough. Everything that you mentioned is transferable to probably every other public school system in the country.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's critical. And my hat's off to you for identifying it, for being so eloquent, and being willing to put it out there.
Mhm.
Because there's probably some people who probably don't like you right now because
Probably.
you're going against their narrative, and they probably don't like me either. Well, that's okay.
That's fine.
But all we can ask for is for anyone who knows teachers, married to teachers, related, help support them right now more than ever. Educate, and they need as much support as possible at a time where they're not getting the respect, the compensation, or the support that they truly need and deserve.
Yep. Great point. And you know what's funny? If you're not married to a teacher or you don't know one, you've probably had a teacher. I mean,
Yep.
we've all had teachers, most of us, I would assume. Go thank them.
Yep.
Like, this is overwhelming. And I think, we both felt like, what can we do,
Yep.
in our position? Even like just thanking a teacher. If you have kids, like go send your kid's teacher a little note. Just thank you for putting in this extra effort during the pandemic. We know it's been a lot of work. And even that helps. I mean,
Yep.
so like you said, maybe we don't change the world here, but if we can just provide more support,
Yep.
I think that's step one, and get people more informed and educated about the profession. I'd be happy if that was the outcome.
Yep. And for anyone out there who thinks that we're narrow viewed and only looking out for our spouses, we're looking out for our spouses because they love teaching your children, and they want to keep teaching, and they want to do it the way that everyone expects them to do it.
Yep.
So that is why we are speaking up, and we are having this conversation. I'm sure there'll be some others too. And that's how people can help. And you make a great point. I mean, I got a lot of former teachers of mine who I'm friends with on Facebook and
Mm-hmm.
social media. I'm still in touch with, and coaches. I mean, these are teachers
Yep.
are also serve as coaches, theater instructors, dance instructors, cheerleading coaches, every other extracurricular activity you can think of in the school system. They also double down as that too.
You're right.
And I know, and we both are lucky to know so many current teachers, because when you are married to a teacher, their faculty and staff become an extended part of your family.
It's very true.
And for every single one of them, this is for you. I know what you mean to your kids and to my wife, and I'll be here fighting for you as hard as I'll fight for my wife. And I would assume the same could be said for you.
Yep. And I appreciate you giving further voice to this. I was happy that my post, was well received and shared, but the fact that we can come on and talk about it even more, anything we can do to amplify this support for public school teachers, count me in.
Yeah. And hey, look, if someone from the other side wants to have a conversation with me, happy to have it. Just I won't be as
would
agreeable.
love that.
Yeah.
I would
I mean,
welcome it.
I'm happy to. We'll both come back and gladly sit down on Zoom and have that conversation. And you can say it to us, because quite frankly, I wouldn't put you in front of a teacher to say it to a teacher's face.
Don't do that.
I don't think you'd want to do that. But if that's something, if someone says, well, you're narrow-minded, then come educate me on your side. Because I've heard the complaints, and right now, if what I'm hearing is what the argument is, you're not going to win.
Yep.
So,
amen to that.
Amen. I don't know how to wrap this up. Normally with sports, it's really easy. You kind of come to the end of a story, whether it's the end of a season or a championship game. This is not a story that's going to go away.
Right.
This is not a battle. Even if a battle comes across successful, there's kids right now in middle school, elementary school who are our future leaders,
Yeah.
and in 20 years, 30 years, they're going to be having a similar fight
Right.
again, because that is just how it happens. So we're going to raise our voices now, but we are going to keep our voices out there. I think we are going to keep this support
Mhm.
up. And
Yeah, we're in the middle of it. You're right. I mean, we can't wrap it up because if it's a sports analogy, we're mid-season.
yeah,
And
we're
Howard
preseason.
County, yeah, Howard County, we're in the midst of work to rule. Baltimore sounds like it's going to be voting pretty soon.
I hope
So,
so.
I mean, we're in the middle of it. So, yeah, keep the conversation going.
Yep. And for all the teachers out there, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. We know, and work to rule, it's not easy because it's not how teachers are wired to just stop at 3:45. And so everybody knows how difficult it is, but and I think Josh would agree. We support you.
Yep.
Keep doing what you're doing. Don't be afraid to stand up and fight for the respect and the salary that you have earned
Yep.
and deserve.
And
So
we'll be there with you. And for all the other spouses that are out there, particularly, it might be tough. We have to do our part
yeah,
to support them in this quest, in this environment, because we're going to see a side that we've never dealt with before, trying to see teachers stop.
right.
And you have all right. I want to thank Jeremy G for an outstanding conversation. Sorry, we had a little technical glitch there at the end, but Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on this week's episode of Monday Night Josh, Word of Josh, and uh, expanding more on just the most incredible article. Sorry, the incredible article, but probably the single most incredible post I've ever read posted on Facebook. That's how much it spoke to me. That's how powerful it was. And it was a week ago tonight that Jeremy posted that, and I'm just it was a real. First of all, it's always great to catch up with someone you've known for over 30 years. But to be able to have that conversation and especially be able to share it, and for all the teachers out there um, who are doing everything in their power to help educate all of the children across this country, who are making lesson plans right now, grading papers right now, thinking about what they're going to do for every student that they have in their room. We all thank you. We are all grateful to you, and we are all here with you, supporting you, standing by your side, and understand what it is that you're fighting for, and understand that we need to fight right along with you. So thank you, all of you. I know Jeremy's very proud of his wife. I'm very proud of my wife. And there are just hundreds of thousands of teachers all across this country who are doing so many great things. And we're grateful to every single one of you. So thank you for what everyone's doing. Thank you for everything you've done over the last year. It's been just about a year now that everybody pretty much went home, and and different school systems throughout the country have been doing different things. But we really wanted to also throw our support behind the Teachers Association of Baltimore County and the Howard County Schools Teachers Association. These unions, no matter what anyone will tell you, teachers are not on vacation. Teachers are not out there just living it up right now. They are working harder than ever. And for anyone who's out there, whether you just think you don't know until you see it. You don't know until you live it, and you don't know until you are a teacher. And I can certainly say when you're living with a teacher, you get an idea of what teachers are going through. But if you're sitting out there because you're frustrated and have COVID fatigue and want to point a finger at a teacher, point a finger at somebody else. Teachers are working too hard. They don't need this extra aggravation of people pointing fingers at them, because they want to be focusing on their students and educating. So to every teacher out there, thank you. We love you. We support you. And we will be here supporting you nonstop until we move through. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in. It was a very extended edition of Monday Night Josh Tonight, Word of Josh, but this was something I felt was too important to not talk about. And so I want to thank everyone for for tuning in and watching. Or if you're listening, you could always download this podcast via iTunes or Spotify or Amazon, wherever you like to get your podcasts from. Just look up the Word of Josh podcast. You can download it right to your phone, listen to my beautiful voice in the car, re-listen to my talk with Jeremy G, and hear what he has to say. And please, when you have a moment this week, if you know a teacher, reach out and say thanks. If you have a teacher you're still in touch with, reach out and say thanks. To all of our teachers out there, thank you. We love you. Everyone have a great evening. I'm Josh. Bye-bye.